Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session. So, today we are going to continue our discussion on chapter number 3. In last session, can anyone provide me like what we discussed? A quick recap. Can anyone tell me quickly? So, what we discussed in the last session on chapter number 3? Yes, come on. What we discussed on chapter number 3 last? Okay. So, yeah, we discussed about planning, audit planning, overall audit planning. We discussed about overall audit strategy. We discussed about the audit program, where we saw the audit program also, like one of the examples for the audit program. And then we started with one very important standard, that was SA 600. Yes or no? We started with SA 600. And then we discussed SA 600 in detail, like what is 600, when it is applicable, it is not applicable in case of joint audit, it is applicable in case of uh, principal auditor, another auditor. Remember, we went through the SA 600 in detail. We discussed various scenarios over there, and then we also solved some questions on the same topic. Yes or no? Okay. So now what we are going to do, we are going to continue the discussion with the other standards which are relevant from the planning and the execution perspective. These are the kind of special consideration that we need to understand when we are doing the planning or we are actually performing the audit. Special areas you can call it. Okay. So the next standard that we are going to discuss is SA 610. Can anyone tell me what is SA 610 about? 610? Anyone? Very important standard. So what it is about? No, you guys haven't gone through the study material yet. See, the main thing is your own reading. If you want to understand a particular topic, you have to go through that topic from the study material. So the first thing is you have to read the topic from the study material, and then we will discuss over here, because then you will have a more clarity on SA 610 or any of the topic that we are going to discuss. Very good, Lavanya. Using the work of internal auditors. Very important topic. And why it is important? Because here we will learn about, when we are using the work of internal auditor, what are the things that we should consider? Okay. What are the things we should focus upon? Or when we are planning to use the work of internal auditor, then at that point in time, what are the things that are relevant from the, using the work of internal auditors perspective? On your study material, if you see, you have a page number 3.24 where you have SA 610. Okay, 3.24 SA 610, that is using the work of internal auditors. We will also read this particular standard from this bare text also, because it will give us more clarity and more understanding over there. Like, we will be able to understand how it is given in the standard, how is it given in the study material. Both we will be able to correlate. Okay. So, as we already know, we have discussed multiple times that each and every standard is divided into certain parts. One, you have the introduction, objectives, definition of the standard. Okay, so over here, if you see, you have introduction, definition, objectives of the standard, and then you have the requirements of the standard, and this is the application material, additional explanatory material of the standard. Okay, as usual, when we start a standard, we start learning, we first focus upon why to understand this. Why is the reason that we need to look into? Why is the particular cause that for which we need to understand this standard? Like, what was the need of this standard using the work of internal auditors? Okay, before we jump deep dive into the standard, there are two questions I have over here for you guys. Number one, when I talk about using the work of internal auditor, what do I meant by work? What is work over here? Number two, who are internal auditors? I'm talking about internal auditors. Who are internal auditors and what is work means? Can anyone tell me what work means in this particular scenario? When I say using the work of internal auditor, what that means? Anyone? What that means? What is work means? So when I'm saying using the work of internal auditor, what is the work that we are using? What work I'm referring over here? Anyone? Work performed by internal auditor according to their scope of requirement. Okay, very good. What else? Anyone else? What is the work over here? What is the work over here? What do we mean by work? Because till the time you will not understand this particular concept of work, we will not be able to understand the standard itself. So work and the internal auditors are the two important concepts first we need to understand. Okay, now conclusions drawn by internal auditors. Yes, very good, Chitra. Anyone else would like to add to this? What do we meant by work? Okay, now if no, then let me explain you what work means here. When I say work, there could be two type of work that we are referring to. One which is already performed by internal auditor, and one that is required to be performed by internal auditor. Okay. So when I talk about the work, I mean that there are two type of work. One that is performed by, you can say already performed by internal auditor, and two to be performed by internal auditor. Okay. So one is that already performed by, second which is they are going to perform. Now see, when I say one they already which is already performed by, for that, see, whenever they have performed the work perfectly fine, that is a verb. Second, to be performed, like in the future, in the coming, if they are going to perform, then what we'll say to them, okay, you perform as per our requirement. Any which ways you are not performed till now, you work as per our requirement. So here, to be performed is sometimes known as direct assistance. Okay, they are going to assist us because they have not performed the work as of now. We will say them, okay, do one thing. When you are going to perform the work, you perform as per our requirement. As we say, that is one of the work that we will use. Second, when I say already performed, it is the basic one when we talk about using the work. Okay, the work already performed. So there are these are the two works. Now, when I talk about internal auditors, can anyone tell me what do you mean by internal auditors? Can internal auditors be external person, consultant? So I have few categories like consultant, employee, director of company, okay, independent, CA firm. Can a company appoint a consultant who is not a CA? Okay, so consultant, I will write here not a CA. So can a company appoint a consultant who is not a CA, and can we call him the internal auditors? Second, can an employee be classified as an internal auditor if he is doing the internal audit? Can a director be called an internal auditor, and can an independent CA firm who is being appointed by the company be called an internal auditors? Like these are the few things like who you are not an internal auditors. Come on. So here we are discussing about who can be internal auditors and who cannot be an internal auditor. Anyone? All of them? Okay, very good. Anyone? Like who can be internal auditor, who cannot be? All of anyone can be? Anyone? Okay. Very good. So anyone can be an internal auditor if company appoints them. Now, second question comes is, can we say independent CA firm, internal auditor? And if we use of, like, for example, let's say independent CA firm. I'll remove all these things as of now. Okay. Now, my question with an example is, let's say ABC and company, CA firms, was hired as an internal auditors of XYZ Limited when using the work performed by ABC and company, should stat auditor apply SA 600? Can I say that when I am using the work of ABC and company, who are the internal auditors, but they are the CA firms, can I call that I am using the work of another auditor in this scenario? Can I call ABC as an another auditor? They are the CA firm, they are independent, but they are appointed as an internal auditor. Do they qualify for the another auditor? Yes or no? Don't you think they also qualify for being an another auditor? Yes, no, can't say. Okay, very good, Lavanya. Anyone else? What do you think? What do you think? Can we call them another auditor? Yes or no? If no, then why? Why not? Very good, Mega. Very good. But why, Chitra? Why we cannot include them in that category? Any specific reason for not including them in that category? Very important part. Like we need to understand why we are not calling them as an another auditor. Why we are not calling them? Absolutely correct. They are not issuing any opinion. Remember, when we discussed SA 600 also, at that point in time, our first condition was when I call an internal auditor, that is, sorry, another auditor or other auditor that is issuing an opinion on FS, but that FS is of some other entity. Okay. He does not issue opinion on the parent entity's FS, but he's issuing opinion on the another entity's FS. So here it was opinion on another subsidiary. If you see, when we discussed, it was opinion on FS, which was another subsidiary. Opinion was issued. But now when I talk about internal audit, here you don't have any opinion. Now this work performed simple is not an opinion. Hence, I cannot call them another auditor. No, because opinion is missing. And here I cannot apply SA 600. Simple. Now I understood that, okay, internal auditors are there. They are not issuing opinion. I cannot say that they are the another auditor. They are the internal auditors. So if anyone is appointed as an internal auditor, I will be applying SA 600. So if I have to use the work performed by the internal auditor, I will apply SA 600. Clear till this? Yes, no? Clear or not? Okay. Now, the second thing I want to discuss is, as of now, we have just discussed the type of work. We need to actually discuss the work they have performed. Okay. Like which type of work it involves in the direct assistant and already performed. And can we use the work directly or there are conditions applied? See, when I talk about using the work, this particular part, using the work is subject to conditions. And those are the conditions that we need to understand. First, we will understand the condition and then we will understand the work that we can use subject to the conditions. So you can use the work subject to the conditions of the internal audit. Okay. Now let's go to the objective first. Okay. So here is the objective. What objective says is the objectives of the external auditor. Here we will be using the term external auditor, internal auditor, not only the auditor, because it can be confusing. If I use the term only auditor, it can be internal, external, both. The objectives of the external auditor, where entity has an internal audit function and the external auditor expects to use the work of internal audit function. Now, internal audit function, when I call it, it is beyond the internal auditor only. So when you, in a simple terms, if I talk about internal auditor can be an individual person. Okay. But when I talk about internal audit function, that includes your internal auditor plus his or her team. Okay. So when I say function, it is a team. You can understand whole team we are talking about. So when I talk about internal auditors, we will say internal audit function. And when I talk about function as a whole, that means a team where you have an internal auditor and her team whose work we are using it. Okay. So At a lot of places, you will see internal audit function, internal audit function. That is a team that we are talking about. Now, when the external auditor plans to use the work of internal audit function to modify, reduce the extent of the audit procedures to be performed. Now, why we are using the work? There is a reason to modify the nature timing of the work that we are going to perform and to reduce the extent of the audit procedures that we have to perform. So the objective here is to modify the nature timing and to reduce the extent. Then only it is advisable to use the work of internal auditor. Otherwise, why if someone will use the work of internal auditor? We are using the work because we want to somehow reduce the work that we are going to perform on the audit. We will rely upon the work that is performed by the internal auditor so that it can help us in reduction of the audit procedures that we are going to perform directly by the external auditor. That is a one of the part. Work that is already performed. Second, use internal auditor to provide direct assistance. This is the first part. This is the first type of work. Okay, where you use the work of function to modify the nature and timing or reduce the extent. Second, you use the internal auditor to provide direct assistance. Now, in both of the scenarios, the difference is at one, we are talking about use the work. Okay. So my important area is using the work in the first of the category. In second category, I'm using the internal auditor for the assistance. Okay. So that is the difference between both of them. On one side, I'm saying I will use the work. Second side, I'm saying I will basically use the internal auditor's help. Here we have a work. Here we talk about internal auditors. Let me reduce the size for you guys. Okay. Talking about work over here. Here I'm talking about internal auditors. Okay. So that is the using the work of internal auditor in two different ways. That the work that is supposed to be they are going to do, and second is the work they have already performed. Now we will go further. We will let's discuss further. The second thing is when we are using the work, what the objective is first to determine whether the work of internal audit function or direct assistance from internal auditor can be used. If so, in which areas and to what extent? Number two, okay, if using the work of internal audit function to determine whether the work is adequate for the purpose of audit. And the third, if we are using direct assistant, okay, if we are asking them to help us, then to appropriately direct, supervise, and review their work. If they are working for you, then you have to direct, supervise, and review their work. This is something I'm saying that external auditor to review, okay, supervise, and direct internal auditor when they are helping external auditor. My question to you is, why can't I place a responsibility on internal auditor for the work they have performed? Why I have to direct, supervise, or review? I can say the work has been performed by the internal auditor. We provided them the instruction, they performed the work, and we assume that they might have performed the work correctly if they are CA. Why we need to direct, supervise, or review the work? What is the need of doing this? So my question is, why the external auditor has to review, supervise, direct internal auditor? Why? Why can't I say that, okay, no, go and just provide them the instruction the way we have done in SA 600, and when they perform the work, you assume that the work performed by them is appropriate if they are a chartered accountant. Otherwise, evaluate their competency. Why can't I say here also this particular same thing? Very good, Chitra. Okay, Lavanya. There is a standard also which requires external auditor to review, supervise, and direct. Which standard is that? Which standard is that? Come on, guys. There's a standard which says it's a responsibility of the external auditor to review, supervise, and direct. Which standard is that? Anyone? Yes, very good, Mega. Absolutely correct. External auditor has to issue an opinion. That's why external auditor has to comply with SA 220. Plus, their firm has to comply with the SQC1. Over there, we understood no, it is the responsibility of the auditor, to guide, supervise, and direct their team, engagement team. Yes or no? So, when I talk about internal auditor helping us, they are becoming our team. In case of a team, we have to guide them, supervise them, because ultimately we are the responsible. SA 220 already says that. Yes or no? The answer to the why is your SA 220. So SA 220 requires external auditor to review, supervise, and direct their teams. And when you are using internal auditor, you are saying that, okay, internal audit is our team, part of team, because they are working for us. That's why we have to review, supervise, and direct. Okay. So SA 220 plus SQC1 both require this thing. So there are three objectives now that we need to work for. Number one, determine, okay, whether the work which like we want to use for the internal audit function can be used. So first thing we need to evaluate, can we use the work of internal auditor? If so, in which areas and to what extent? How much work we can use that is already performed by internal auditor? So here we are talking about work that is already performed. Second, we need to determine whether the work is adequate for the purpose of audit, which is already performed by the internal auditor. Third, when we are talking about direct assistance also, we need to determine, can we take the direct assistance? If yes, in which areas, to what extent? Plus, we need to direct them, supervise them, and review their work before using it. Okay. Now, first question, when we want to determine the work that is already performed by internal auditor, can we use that? How will you determine? My first objective, to achieve first objective, what you will do? If I want to determine that how, or whatever work that is performed by the internal auditor, how can I use that, or can I use that or not? My first question, how can I determine that I can use the work of internal auditor or not? So if I want to determine how much work I can use, how in how can I use, in which areas, what I need to do, what I need to actually check before I can use the work. going through their reports. Okay, but what I will see in their reports? If I have to go through their reports, what will be the purpose of going through the reports? What I will get? What I will get? Check the areas that are covered by the internal auditors. Okay, but in order to determine whether I can use their work or not, what I need to actually check, let's say I want to determine whether I can use their work or not, I will go through their report. I will check what areas they have covered. Then what? What is the next step? How can I understand what I need to do further? Just by checking areas, can I come and say that, okay, I can use the work of internal auditor? Is checking of areas sufficient, or I need to do something else also? Whether our scope matches with their work. Okay, good. Matching the scope. What else? What else? See, when I say that, okay, when I'm using the work of internal auditor, basically, what I'm saying is that in this particular scenario, when I want to use the work of internal auditor, I need to check few things before I can go on the work, like what work they have performed. I need to go and see whether I can directly rely upon whatever their work is there or not. Whether the work is adequate, whatever we are saying, scope, their reports, that is the adequacy of the work. That's the second part you are talking about. This one, is their work adequate? I'm not talking about the adequacy of the work as of now. I'm talking about, can it be used? Adequacy means what areas they have done, what reports they have, what are the things, all those stuff that is in the adequacy. When I say can be used, is something related to the internal audit function. I need to check about the function. What function is, who is the auditor basically, what are their skills, what are their knowledge, what methodologies they are using, are they independent, objectivity, a lot of things are there. Before I can go and say that I need to use their work, I need to evaluate the internal audit function. Okay, I need to evaluate the internal audit function, and to evaluate the internal audit function, I will check three things. I will check three things. Okay, one is the objectivity of the internal audit function. Second is the competency of the internal audit function, and third is the approach that they are following. Okay, so in evaluating whether I can use the work of internal auditor or not, okay, in order to determine this particular part, whether and in which areas I can use the work of internal auditor or not, the first thing I need to do is, sorry, yeah, the first thing I need to do is I need to evaluate the internal audit function. And to evaluate, the first thing I need to check is the objectivity, competency, and the approach that they are following. Okay, I call is an OCA approach. That is the objectivity, how the organizational status and their policies and procedures are supporting their objectivity. Number two, the level of competency that internal audit function already has. Third is the approach that they are following while doing the work, whether they follow a systematic approach, disciplined approach, what quality control they are using. And once I know these things, then only I can go and I can rely upon the work performed by internal auditor. Okay. When I talk about organizational status and relevant policies supporting the objectivity, the first point, can anyone give me an example of this? What it means? If I have to ask you, give me an example of this. What it will include when I say organizational status, relevant policies supporting the objectivity. How can I verify this? How can I verify this particular part? Anyone? Come on, guys. Anyone? What will you check to verify the organizational status? Come on, quickly. No, no one. You guys haven't read the topic yet from the study material. Okay. Uh, so when I talk about relevant policies and procedures supporting the objectivity, okay, at that point in time, I am saying that how the internal audit function is structured within the organization so that it can, guide me or it can provide me evidence of objectivity. That means how it is placed in the organization. I'll give you a quick example. Let's say I'm talking about organizational chart. In organizational chart, let's say you have a various CEO, CXOs, CFO, okay, various people are there, management level. Now, over here, you have a chief internal auditor who reports to, let's say there is a below CFO, there is a VP finance. Okay. And this chief internal auditor is reporting to this VP finance. Then this VP finance is reporting to CFO, and then CFO is reporting to board of directors, basically over here. Now, this chief internal auditor has the internal audit function under it, like the rest of the teams. Now, this VP finance directs the chief internal auditor about the scope of his audit and reports that are forwarded to CFO. So without this VP finance, nothing goes beyond to CFO. Okay. Everything has to go through this VP finance. If he says yes, then things go ahead. Otherwise, things don't go ahead. Now, in this particular example, tell me one thing. This VP finance, like he's guiding chief internal auditor. Can you say that this chief internal auditor over here is objective? My question is, can I call him objective? Or can I say that his objectivity is still there? Will he be objective in his decisions? Or whether his objectivity will still be there or not? Yes, no. Obviously, yes. Very good, Chitra. His objectivity will be impacted. As a result, here, the organizational status, the policies and procedures do not support his objectivity. So that means I cannot rely upon. First thing, objectivity goes down. First important point, objectivity is not there. There is, very less things that I may find his work adequate. See, why? Because if I plan to use his work, and if I plan to use and embed his work in my work, it has to be objective. That means if he's not, unbiased, if he's biased towards any of the thing, for example, his KPI or his performance bonus is dependent upon how much clean report he issues. In that case, I cannot rely upon his report, because if he issues a clean report, then only he will get bonus. So his objectivity is impaired. There are high chances that he will issue clean report. He's not unbiased. As a result, I cannot rely upon the work performed by internal auditor. Similarly, the level of competence. How will you check the level of competence? If you have to check the level of competence, what you will check? Come on, guys, quickly. If you have to check the level of competence, what you will do? How will you check? Come on, come on. How will you check his level of competency? Qualification and knowledge, yes, very good. Professional background, level of knowledge and experience, yes, absolutely correct. So when I talk about competency, I need to see what he has done. Knowledge, skill, experience, all these are the factors that I need to understand. Knowledge, skill, experience. Then the systematic and disciplined approach into the quality control, including quality control. How will you verify that? Whether he is using a systematic and disciplined approach, or he is using the system of quality control. How will you verify this one? Come on, guys. How will you verify this particular part? Anyone? Evaluate their professional knowledge. Okay. Evaluate the procedures performed by them, how issues are addressed and found through the working papers and documentation. Okay, very good. Yes. See, when I talk about systematic and disciplined approach, that means, what is the work of internal audit? Can anyone tell me what they do? What is the work of internal audit? What is the work of internal audit in an organization? Anyone? The work of internal audit in an organization? No? Work of internal audit in an organization. What is the work usually? Check for internal control, risk management. Yes, very good. Check policies and procedures, internal audit, checking the areas, testing the samples, internal controls. Yes, very good. Whether the Internal auditor checks that how internal controls are working or not. Very good. Yes. Fraud detection. Yes. So a lot of things are there which are, responsibility of internal audit. Let's say, for example, internal controls. Now, in an organization, you have a 10 different kind of internal controls, 10 different areas for the internal controls. The question will come is how they are selecting what to test. If you understand how the scope of audit of internal audit is decided, that will tell you about their approach. Number two, once they decide the scope, how testing is done, materiality while they're testing, sample selection, sample size, testing methodology. What is testing methodology? What is testing methodology or type of testing? What is testing methodology or type of testing? Anyone? Testing methodology or type of testing? Simple, like you are doing observation, inspection, inquiry, recalculation, reperformance, what you are doing in your testing. For example, if they are testing using only inquiry, will you say it is sufficient? Will you say it is a systematic and disciplined approach if they are only doing inquiry, nothing else? So, in order to check whether they have a systematic and disciplined approach, what testing is done, how scope is selected, materiality, sample size, testing methodologies, a lot of things are there that you need to understand. And then you need to decide, okay, I can rely upon the work of internal auditor or not. Okay. Then the comes is like, let's say objectivity is not there, competency is not there, systematic and disciplined approach is not there. If any of the item is missing, in that case, simple, do not audit, external auditor shall not use the work of internal auditor or internal audit function. If do not adequately support the objectivity, when I talk about policies and procedures, lacks sufficient competency, does not apply a systematic and disciplined approach. If any of the thing is missing, you should not use the work of internal auditor. We have only covered till now this part. Can be used. So to understand can be used, you need to check OCA. Simple. Check OCA. In order to understand, can you use the work of internal auditor? Clear? Any doubt on this OCA part? Objectivity, competency, and approach. Okay. Objectivity, competency, and approach. I will write it over here. Now, this is the first part that we understood, that is, can be used or cannot be used. The second thing we need to understand, let's say we say yes to OCA. OCA is there, objectivity, competency, and approach is there. Now, the second question comes is, which areas and to what extent? In which areas and to what extent is something we need to understand now. How will you decide which areas? Which areas, how will you decide? Anyone? If you have to decide which areas, how will you decide this? Come on, guys. How will you decide which areas? Based on the scope of internal audit, and external auditor will select the areas relevant for the purpose to give his opinion. Okay. Now I will give you certain areas. You tell me, can you use the work of internal auditor in that area? Number one, fraud evaluation. Number two, testing of management estimate. Third, valuation of intangibles. Fourth, evaluation of going concern. Now, these are the four areas I want to use the work of internal auditor. Can I? These are the four areas where I want to use the work of internal auditor. Can I do that? Can I use the work of internal auditor in these areas? If I say OCA is fine, can I use? Yes, no, can't say. Quickly. I'll see his scope and accordingly decide what areas to be delegated. Sensitivity matters, where his bias can be involved and should be avoided. Okay, very good. In all these areas, using only the internal auditor report will not give sufficient appropriate audit evidence to the external auditor. We'll have to do other checking. Okay. No, sir. Most of you have said no. Why? What is so special in these areas? I am saying no to the using the work of internal auditor. What is so special in these areas? Risk level is high. Very good. Yes. What is so special in these areas? Why I'm saying no to the work of internal auditor? One is a risk. Second, anything else apart from the risk? Do you think that it's relevant or it's there in these areas because of which I'm saying no? These areas can be influenced by management, so opinion of internal auditor may be biased. Absolutely correct. Yes, risk, biasness. So these are certain things for which I shouldn't be using the work of internal auditor. In order to understand whether I can use the work of an internal auditor in a particular area, I need to understand what is the risk in that area. Okay. Like, for example, if the risk is higher, I cannot use. If I say it involves judgment, I cannot use. If I say that particular area over there has a higher level of management biasness, difficult to use. Okay. So these are certain things are relevant when I talk about, like, when I say, okay, what areas I can basically, in which I can basically use the work of internal auditor. So where the more judgment is involved, higher risk of material misstatement is there. Sometimes in certain areas, you might see that internal auditor doesn't have competency. For example, valuation. It might happen that internal auditor doesn't have necessary valuation skills. I will not use his work. So it's not necessary that at every area, internal auditor has a competency. Okay. So if there are significant judgment, then I shouldn't be using the work of internal auditor. For example, one more such area I'm giving to you. Determination of materiality. Can I say internal auditor to determine materiality for me? Can I say to internal auditor, help me in determining the materiality for me? No, absolutely not. Because these are the areas where external auditor has to make a judgment. I cannot. So these are all areas are a strict no. So in which areas? Basically, these all areas are strict no. Okay. Reason because of higher risk, higher judgment, professional judgment required by competency. All these are the factors. Now, same, the standard says that areas where I can use are the normal areas. But if it involves significant judgment in the audit, like materiality, okay, if it involves more judgment in case of planning and performing relevant audit procedures, evaluating the audit evidence gathered, assessed risk of material misstatement at the assertion level is higher, okay, less the internal audit function organizational status, lower the competency of the internal audit function, then I should not be using the work of internal auditor in those areas. Clear? Any doubt to this? So if these are the things, then I should not be using the work of internal auditor. Rather, external auditor should perform its own work. And as an external auditor, rather I should use less of internal auditor's function work and perform more work directly as an external auditor. So again, these areas are more judgment, evaluation of audit evidence, okay, higher risk of material misstatement, less organizational status, lower competency. So if these are the things, then please don't use. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt? Okay, if no further doubts, we will proceed to the next part. That is, now we understood, okay, which are the areas where we shouldn't be using the work of internal auditor. Okay, and which are the areas where we can use limited work. See, for example, if you are using the work of internal auditor in other areas apart from this, You can use to a certain extent, again, till where you don't have a higher risk of material misstatement, you don't have organizational status, you don't have a competency issues. You can use the work of internal auditor. So our first objective, which talks about in which areas and to what extent we have seen risk, evaluation of evidence, all these things. Now, second question is to determine whether the work is adequate for the purpose of audit. Now, once we decide to use, then we need to evaluate what is the outcome of their work. Means, let's say, for example, they have done the testing. Now we need to understand whether the testing is sufficient for us or not. Do we need to perform anything else after using their testing? Is their work sufficient for us? So how will you understand that? How will you identify that whether their work is adequate or not? Come on, guys. How will you understand whether the work performed by the internal audit is adequate for the purpose of the audit? Anyone? They have done the testing. Let's say, for example, we will take some example. Let's say they have done a testing of expenses. Okay, they have done testing of professional expense area. How can I make sure that their work that they have performed is adequate for me? How can I make sure that? Anyone? No? Okay. Check the audit program and the documentation done by them. Okay, very good. Check the type of testing, review their work. Okay. Let's talk about professional expense. Okay, whatever professional expense and invoices were there, I'm talking about that particular area. Tell me, how will you ensure that the professional expense testing done by them will be adequate for your purpose or not? What you will check in that? What you will check in that? Anyone? I'm giving you a simple area, that is the professional expenses. Invoice for professional expenses or professional expenses that are booked in a particular year for a company. How will you make sure that professional expenses testing done by internal audit function is adequate for you? Very good, Mega. Absolutely correct. Come on, quickly. Yes, Sriram, I'm able to get your responses. Perform additional procedures and confirm whether the conclusion reached by them can be relied upon. Okay. Can you give an example of these additional procedures? Anyone, if anyone can give me an example of these additional procedures? I will decide materiality based on the risk involved in the materiality. I will verify the work done and decide. Okay. Uh, okay, Sri Ram, like materiality is one of the part, risk involved is another part. But again, what else you will check? Okay, I'll tell you. Now, when I'm checking the, let's say, professional invoices, okay, sample checking, okay, very good, yes. When I'm talking about professional invoices, that if there is a particular professional invoice area, if there is a particular professional expense booking area, what I will do? See, simple it is, straightforward. Let's say total professional expense which is booked in a particular financial year. Okay, I'm talking about FY 24-25 is of, let's say, for example, 25 crores. Now, my first thing that I validate is number one, when testing was done, what population was taken? What was the population at the time of testing? That means, let's say, for example, this 25 crores is there. Now, while doing the testing, the population was taken, let's say, rupees 10 crores only. Rest of the expenses were scoped out. Okay, I'm giving you scenario one, scenario two. So let's say in second scenario, the sample size was 25 crores only. Second, once the testing was done, basically, population was selected, sample size was there. Sample size and sample total. Size and total, we need to check both. So let's say sample size in this was 10 invoices. Here, 50 invoices. Here, the sample total was, let's say, rupees 50 lakhs. Here it was, let's say, 10 crores. Could be, one invoice very big amount, or invoice is very big amount. Selection, sample selection methodology. Sample selection method. Here it was uh, first 10, last 10 of the period. First and last 10. Here it was random. Or let's say then outcome or testing attribute. Testing attributes. So what was tested? See, I have taken this sample, but at the end, what I tested, that's a very important part. So they took first 10, last 10 and did cutoff testing. Here, accuracy testing was done. Accuracy, and you can say, let's say, for example, existence and occurrence, ENO. Okay, existence and occurrence, accuracy, that was tested. Outcome, in both of the cases, no observation. Now tell me, these are the two scenarios that you can see in front of you. Okay, you have these two scenarios in front of you. In which scenario you can use the work of internal auditor? You can say it is adequate. And second, in which scenario you will say it is not adequate? So my question is, which scenario is adequate for you? Which scenario work is adequate for external auditor? Simple. Which scenario work is the adequate for the purpose of external auditor? What do you say? Which scenario? Number one, number two. Which scenarios work is adequate for the purpose of external auditor? In first scenario, the population that was taken was 10 crores. In second scenario, full population was taken of 25 crores. In first scenario, sample size was 10 invoices. In second scenario, sample size was 50. First scenario, total sample 50 lakhs. Second scenario, total sample 10 crores. Sample selection, first 10, last 10 for the cutoff testing. Here, random was done, accuracy and ENO. No observation in both of the scenarios, which is your relevant one. Question. Very good, Sriram. Very good, Chitra. Very good, Mega. Yes. See, the adequacy here is something that is decided based on the objective of the auditor, external auditor. Now, the question is, before I answer the scenario one or scenario two, let's say, external auditor wanted to use work of internal audit to verify proper cutoff procedures, and he wanted to test professional expense directly as it contains higher risk of material misstatement. Now, this is something auditor wants. This is the requirement of auditor. Now tell me which scenario is correct. Which scenario you will use? Which scenario you will use? Let's say external auditor wanted to use the work of internal audit to verify proper cutoff. And he wanted to test directly the expenses because it has a higher risk of material misstatement. In that case, I will be using scenario 1. Some might say, sir, why not scenario 2? It is giving you more comfort. Is it adequate? It has more testing. But whether the testing is relevant for the purpose of the external auditor is something we need to understand. Absolutely correct, Megha. Absolutely correct, Chitra. So, yes, scenario 2 is giving you more amount of evidence, but is that relevant for you as an auditor? I can say that okay, scenario 2 or testing 2 was done by internal auditor gives me more comfort, but my objective is here not to get a comfort on the accuracy. My objective was cutoff and testing. That's why scenario 2 testing is not relevant or adequate for the purpose that I want. It will not give me sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. As a result, scenario 2 is not useful for me. If scenario 1 testing done by internal auditor, I will use that. I hope I'm clear. Any doubt with this? Okay, let's go back to the standard. So when I want to decide whether the work is adequate or not, I need to understand what is the objective of the external auditor over here, what he wants to achieve. And then based on that, I will evaluate what work has been performed by internal auditor. So in order to decide the adequacy of the work that is performed by the internal audit function, to determine the adequacy, first I need to understand why I'm using the work. And then I will check the evidence and then the conclusions. Okay. So simple, in order to determine the adequacy for the purpose of audit, I need to check whether it was properly planned, performed, supervised, reviews, and document based on what I want. Let's say if I want cutoff, then it was properly planned for the cutoff. It was properly performed, supervised for the cutoff, reviewed for the cutoff. Second, sufficient and appropriate audit evidence has been obtained. That means enough samples were tested. For example, in our scenario 2, what if I change instead of first and last time, I'm just saying first one, last one. Only 2 samples were tested. One first here and total 2. Total 2 samples were tested. And instead of 50 lakhs, the amount tested was, let's say, for example, 1.5 lakh. That is not adequate for my purpose. Sorry. Here, the sufficient and appropriate audit evidence is not obtained. Sufficient appropriate audit evidence is missing. Sorry, I cannot use that sample to draw reasonable conclusions. 2 samples cannot give me a conclusion. For sure, I will not use this. And the conclusions reached are appropriate in the circumstances. That means if the conclusion, let's say for example, here, while testing the 2 samples, this sample failed. It was of last year. It failed the testing. And then management provided some explanation to the internal auditor, and internal auditor then later on said, okay, it is fine, not an observation. So you need to check how they have dealt with the observations, misstatement that it has been identified. For example, they identified last year invoice now, and they booked in the current year. And then management says, no, we did not receive the invoice in the last year, hence we are booking in the current year. And because of that explanation, internal auditor cleared that invoice. They changed the status from the failed to pass. Do you think it is appropriate? So this invoice failed. Why? So out of this, I'll explain over here. You will understand with an example. So this sample, the first sample, failed because invoice of last year booked in current year. Then management provided explanation. Management explanation was that received in current year. But services received last year, invoice received in current year. This invoice received in current year, although services received in last year. And because of that, he changed the sample from pass to fail. Now tell me, do you think the testing and outcome supports the conclusion? Question comes is whether outcome of testing supports conclusion. Based on this explanation, they changed from pass to fail. So here it was passed later on. Passed asterisk mark because of this particular explanation that was provided. Now tell me, do you think this is appropriate? Do you think this is appropriately passed? Very good, Mega. Absolutely correct. Do you think this is appropriately passed? Simple scenario. Okay, as an internal auditor, like let's say for example, you keep yourself on the place of internal auditor. What you would have done? What you would have done in this scenario? Would you have passed this thing? I will check additional invoice and report my observation. Okay. But will you pass? Will you pass this sample? Shriram, Mega, what do you say? Will you pass this sample? Absolutely no. They should have booked the provision, and when the invoice was received, book invoice in front of that provision. You follow accrual system. You have to book the provision. In this scenario, you cannot say that the invoice received last year, that's why I'm booking. Like invoice received in the current year, that's why I'm booking in the current year. Absolutely not. Where is the accrual system? Provision. Now that's where comes is whether the conclusions that are reached are appropriate in the circumstances. The conclusion that the sample was passing is appropriate in the circumstances or not, and are consistent with the function, with the results that have been derived by the function. So when I talk about conclusions over here, it is about changing the sample from fail to pass based on the explanation. When I talk about sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, testing one sample. When I talk about properly planned, performed, and supervised, it is something, what they are doing. I need comfort on the cutoff. Are they doing cutoff testing? So I need to check all these things. First, you can say, I usually call it PPS. Okay. PPS, that is planned, performed, supervised, review and documented. Okay, PPS, which is there. First one is a PPS. Then sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. Third, conclusions, appropriate conclusions, basically. So you need to check all these three things. That is PPS, sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, and appropriate conclusions, in order to determine the adequacy of work. Clear? Any doubt? Any doubt? So our objective, that is to determine whether the work of internal audit function can be used, we will check OCA. If so, in which areas? Risk, professional judgment, okay, higher risk of material misstatement, biasness, all these things we will not use. Then second number, which is adequacy. As I told you, for adequacy, PPS, sufficient and appropriate audit evidence, and your appropriate conclusions, AC. is something you need to check to say that, okay, work is adequate or not. Now, that is the one of the part that we are talking about, the work which is already performed by them. There were two type of works. One is the work that is already performed, use the work. The second one is determining direct assistance. I was talking about now the work that internal audit function has already performed. Now the second category is talking about direct assistance. So I need to check what direct, like, can I use their work in direct assistance? Now, for the purpose of direct assistance, there are, again, I need to check few things. One is the competency. Like, what, whether can I use or not. So for direct assistance, again, I need to check whether can I use the work performed by internal auditor. Can be used directly. Like, is it fine if I use their direct assistance? When I talk about direct assistance, is something you can understand that they are working for you as a part of your team. They are doing testing for you as a part of your team. Okay. So in order to determine whether you can use the work of internal audit function for direct assistant, what you will check? What you will check? Now, earlier for this one, for using the already done work, I was checking OCA. Okay, so for example, when I was determining can I use the work of internal audit function, I'd said I will check OCA, objectivity, competency, and approach. Now for direct assistance, what I will check? For direct assistance, what I will check? Okay, Sanjay. Shriram, I will take your question in a while. Don't worry on that. Okay, Lavanya. What I will check when I have to use and when I have to determine can I use the work of internal audit function in direct assistance? Like, basically for the work that is already performed, I checked OCA. In order to determine can they provide direct assistance or can I use the direct assistance, I will check. I will check OC. I will check OC. Now, what is OC? OC stands for objectivity and competency. Why not approach? Why I'm not checking approach? Can anyone tell me? Why I'm only checking objectivity and competency for direct assistance? I am saying I will only check objectivity and competency, not approach. Why I am not checking their approach for direct assistance? Very good, Lavanya. Very good, Chitra. Very good, Mega. And this is because the approach is missing in this particular part because of your objective number 3. That is, what objective 3 is? Direct assistance. You have to appropriately direct, supervise, and review their work. So approach is something that you need to provide to them. Why I will check? That is something I need to provide. The first thing is I will check OC, objectivity and competency. If I am fine with objective and competency, I will provide them the work that they need to do. And for that, I will direct, supervise, and review their work. Pretty straightforward. So I'll not go and check their approach of whatever work they have performed. Not relevant for me. Not relevant for me. Reason because, again, approach is something that will be provided by me. I will provide them the approach. Okay. So only and only objectivity and competency that I need to check for direct assistance. Objectivity and competency. And if there is a threats to objectivity, lacks competency, I should not use internal auditor to provide direct assistance. If there's a threat to objectivity and lacks sufficient competency, why would I take a help from a team member who doesn't have the competency, or there's an issue with the objectivity? Simple. Here, when I talk about direct assistance, understand direct assistance is equal to being a team member. Clear? Now, the second comes is, which are the areas where you should not take help of internal audit function as a direct assistance. Now, remember, here we decided in which areas to what extent. For the using the work of internal audit, we decided in which areas to what extent. Same for the direct assistance also, we need to determine in which areas to what extent. So earlier when I talked about that, okay, if there is a judgment involved, okay, if there is evaluation of audit evidence is there, if the risk of material misstatement is higher, if the internal audit functions organizational status is not there and it is not supporting the objectivity, okay, areas where there is a less objectivity or internal audit functions objectivity is not there. And the last one was competency. So you can say basically, if I talk about, I call them as a Jericho. Okay, that is judgment, evidence, risk of material misstatement, internal audit functions, objectivity or independence and objectivity, you can say, and competency, CO. So you can remember Jericho is a term where, like, if I want to determine to what extent, Jericho will help me to determine to what extent. Similarly, for the purpose of direct assistance, I will check all these things only: judgment, risk of material misstatement, objectivity, competency, and evaluation of audit evidence. Similar, same. There is nothing difference in this. All these points will be applicable for the direct assistance also. Simple. So if the area involves more judgment, I will not use. If the area involves evaluating audit evidence, I will not use. If the area involves higher risk of material misstatement, I will not use. Less organizational status and objectivity, I will not use. Lower competency, I will not use. Simple. So in these areas, I will not use at all. Okay. So I will write here. You can also note it down. Risk of material misstatement, evidence, or you can say evaluating evidence, and judgment. So these are certain areas where I should not be using. Same applicable for direct assistance. Okay, now that was to what extent in which areas. Done. Jericho. For that, you have simple one term, which is Jericho. To what extent, which areas? Jericho. Okay. Now, the last one. If you are using the work of internal auditors to provide direct assistance, then you need to appropriately direct, supervise, and review their work. See, when I'm using the work of internal audit as a direct assistance, can I go in an organization and say, Internal audit, now you work for me, you do testing for me. Can I go directly jump in and say that? Yes, no. If I have to direct, supervise, and review, can I go and directly say that internal audit, I'm directing you, from tomorrow you test for me? Yes or no? No, we have to discuss with them. Very good. Yes. We cannot and just, direct them and give orders them, okay, you do work for me. You now work for me. No, we cannot. Okay. So there is something called, you need to discuss with someone in an organization before giving them orders. Okay. At least you should discuss with their bosses. Okay. What is the internal auditors? Is the independent contractor, state auditor will be organizational status. See, again, here we need to communicate with their bosses. Who will be the boss of internal auditor? Who will be the boss of internal auditor? First, communicate to manager or boss of internal auditor I'm talking about. That is nothing but those charged with governance. They are the head of everything. They are there to look after everything. Usually internal audit function has to report to them. That is audit committee. Internal audit function reports to audit committee, which they are those charged with governance. Now first communicate to those charged with governance. Which is the standard that you use to communicate to those charged with governance? If I talk about communicating to those charged with governance, which is a standard? Absolutely correct. 260. Yes, very good. 260. I need to comply 260 and I need to discuss what is my planned approach. Remember, when I was talking about SA 260, I discussed specifically that I will talk to them, I will inform them about the approach of the audit that I will follow. My plan, audit plan, I will discuss with them my audit plan. Remember, I have this ready with me. Remember, this audit plan was there. So I will discuss this audit plan. Sorry, this is the program. Audit plan is here. Yeah. So this was the audit plan. Remember, we said we will prepare this audit plan. And if I'm using the work of internal auditor for direct assistance, I will mention it here. And then this will be discussed with those charged with governance. Governance, see, I am relying the work of internal auditor, this one, that we will review the work of company's internal audit function, particularly reviews of operational conform to inform our risk assessment and potentially reduce the extent of our testing. I already have this in my plan. I will communicate this. Remember, we discussed that this plan will be discussed with them at the time of SA 260. Okay, so this is something I am discussing as per SA 260, but which is decided as per SA 610. That I determine whether I'm using the work or I'm taking a direct assistance. At that point in time, I determine, do I need to take the work or I need to take direct assistance from them, and accordingly I inform them. Management, see, I'm going to use the work or I'm going to use the direct assistance from internal audit. They will say yes, no, whatever, then the discussions will happen and accordingly we will finalize. See, the external auditor shall, in communicating with those charged with governance, provide an overview of the plan scope, timing of the audit, communicate how external auditor has planned the use of internal audit function. Overview. That what we did in this plan only. This is an overview. When I provided this overview, I provided that, okay, manage those charged with governance. See, this is how I'm planning to use the work of internal auditor. That's what standard says. And when you are using the direct assistance at that point in time, communicate first with them and see whether it is allowed by the laws or regulations. Sometimes laws or regulations might prohibit you. So first check whether it is prohibited by law. Okay, could be prohibited by law. Direct assistance may be prohibited by law. If direct assistance not prohibited by law or regulation, in that case, you need to check OC, objectivity and competency. And then Jericho part, and then you need to discuss with the management also. Before that, you need to discuss with the management prior to using internal auditor. Okay, obtain a written agreement from authorized representative of the entity that they are going to work for me. Second is about the confidentiality of specific matters. Like, okay, one, they are going to work for me, so you will not intervene in the work. Like, you will not, say that, okay, do not, in between you will come and say, no, no, now don't work for internal auditors, oh, external auditors. No. So first, written agreement. Second, confidential specific matters. Okay, you will keep confidentiality. And then I will review the work as per SA 220. Remember, we discussed that review, direct review and supervise as per SA 220, because as per SA 220, the engagement partner and the engagement auditor is responsible for the entire audit. Yes or no? So these are certain things that you need to take care when you are using the work of internal auditor for direct assistance. This is how you need to supervise, direct and review their work. Clear? Any doubt with this? Any doubt? Okay, so there is a question many of our clients do, that we cannot track the work until invoice is done. Our client has over 100% projects and they give any certificate for the percentage of work done, and the record revenue when the invoice is received, and they get the invoice raised when such cases. What can be done? See, in that case scenario, it is, I would say, it is not appropriate to record the revenue when the invoice is received. That is not appropriate unless and until you are following cash system. You have to devise some procedure in order to check what is the work done. Basically, in lot of organizations, timesheet is a mechanism to record and check how much work is done and how much revenue is required to be recorded. Of one such law or regulation is, see, company set is not prohibit. But apart from companies act, let's say if it is an NBFC, RBI regulations can, I don't know, we need to go into detail what RBI regulation says with respect to the internal auditors. When it is, if it is an insurance company, then different. If it is an NBFC insurance, different regulations. Listed, SEBI listed, some type of, they have issued external commercial borrowings or something else, SEBI regulations. So you need to check with respect to the various laws and regulations which are there, and it may change. Okay, let's say if it is a AIF, it is a registered investment advisor, how it is there, whose work you are using in which areas. Accordingly, we need to go and check the laws and regulations. It's not only the Companies Act, it are the various sectorial laws which are applicable. Any other doubt or any other question on SA 610 that we have discussed now? This was your using the work of internal auditor. Any doubt? Any doubt? No? If no further doubts, let's take a quick 10-minute break. After the break, we'll gather back and continue the session. Okay. Let's take a break. Thank you. So we were basically discussing about SA 610 that we discussed in detail. Okay, now let's go to the study material and go through the SA 610. So basically, if you see, using the work of internal auditors, which is 4.5.2. Now again, the responsibility lies with the external auditor only for the opinion expressed that we discussed why we do not say SA 600 rather than we say SA 610. Okay, then responsibility is not received because they are not issuing an opinion that we discussed in the start. Again, the scope, using the work of internal audit function for audit evidence. Using internal audit provide direct assistance. Two type of works that we are talking about. Objectives. The three objectives. First, to determine can we use the work. Number two, if yes, whether it is adequate for the purpose of audit. Number three, if we are getting a direct assistance, then direct supervise and review their work. And for that, you need to first understand whether can you use. Okay, like this is the areas with respect to internal audit has, like when it comes to the performing their work, what they do basically when it comes to the internal audit. And in order to understand can you use their work, whether their work can be used, you need to check for objectivity, competency, systematic and discipline approach, OCA. If not there, do not use. Then second, determining the nature and extent of the work, that is where we can use, in which areas. Okay, for that again we need to consider what kind of work they are performing. Okay, whether it's a significant judgment, remember judgment point, what is the involvement of internal auditor with respect to that, whether it is evaluating audit evidence, more judgment, higher risk of material misstatement, lesser the internal functions objectivity, lesser the level of competency. If that is a scenario, we will not use Jericho. If it is not, then we will use the work of internal auditor. Then we need to communicate as per SA 260. Remember we discussed let their boss know, will include in our plan. When you are using the direct assistance, in case of direct assistance, you need to make sure that you provide them the appropriate guidance with respect to the work they need to perform. Okay, and when you are using the work of internal auditor, coordinate with them, read the reports, perform sufficient and appropriate audit procedure to determine adequacy. How you will determine the adequacy? Adequacy can be determined by PPS, plan performed supervised. Then you need to check their sufficient and appropriate audit evidence is there or not, and the conclusions. Okay, you need to understand what is the level of the competency, again all these things to determine whether you can use the work or not. Okay, and for determining the direct assistance, there are two things. One, objectivity. Second, you need to understand competency of the internal auditors. OC, not A. Once you decide OC, then you need to actually see like whether what are the things that they you want them to do. Can you assign work to them based on the area? Again, significant judgments, higher risk of material misstatement. Then is it area where you have to perform the work, not the internal auditors, Jericho areas. Okay, evaluation of audit evidence, planning and performing relevant audit procedures. So we need to understand that, and accordingly we will not use their work in that particular area. Then review the work performed by internal auditor. Remember SA 220, that it is the responsibility of the external auditor, not the internal auditor. You are issuing the opinion, so you have to review the work. So that was your SA 600 or 610. Any doubt again? Any doubt before we proceed to the SA 620? Sir, some companies have an internal audit department. In such a case, can external auditor rely on the work of such internal audit function as might be biased because it is the department within the entity? See, one thing, internal audit, wherever we have discussed about the objectivity. We have not discussed about the independence. Okay, there are chances that it will be biased. That's why, first of all, we are not talking about independence. Throughout the internal audit, SA 610, we have not spoken a single word of independence. The reason is, yes, because of the biasness. There is 100% chance they are the employees. There will be biasness for sure. But when it comes to the objectivity, when they are making the decisions, they making the decision based on the biasness, or are they making the decision based on the standards, knowledge, professional and technical standards? What is the basis of making the decision? That is something we need to understand. Are their decision making biased? See, there is a chance that it will be biased. That's why we need to evaluate the objectivity. Independence, for sure, they are not independent because they are employees. How they can be independent? And because you don't have independence, there is a threat to objectivity also. I hope I'm clear. Any doubt? Okay. If no doubts, then we will proceed to the next standard, which is SA 620. Can anyone tell me what is SA 620 about? What is SA 620 about? Anyone? Why we have SA 620 and what is SA 620 about? Come on, guys. Should be straightforward, pretty much. Based on the name of the essay itself, you should be able to answer. Yes or no? It is straightforward. Based on the given particular name of the standard, I don't think so. It should be a problem. Engaging any expert for the audit? Yes. Audit using the work of an expert? Yes, absolutely correct. Using the work of an auditor's expert. Now, few questions I would like to ask with respect to this. Again, number one is, what is work? Number two, who can we call as an auditor's expert? First of all, understand these two terms. Then we will proceed ahead. What is work? When I talk about using the work of auditor's expert, what is work? Come on, quickly. Assistant to be provided by expert. Okay. Let's say for example, you hired a person. Okay. You hired a person who is basically expert in the, let's say, auditing standards. He's an expert in the auditing standards. Can you call him an expert? Okay, fine. I am hiring a person to review whatever I am doing. Okay, so a person is there. Let's say a CA hired to provide guidance to auditor about key judgments and documentation. A CA hired to provide guidance to auditor about key judgment and documentation. Can I call him auditor's expert? Simple. Can he be auditor expert? Hired by CA, hired by auditor. He should hold a professional degree recognized by the professional institution. Okay, other than ICAI. Okay. Let's say instead of CA, I say he is also done his masters in law. Plus he is masters in law. Now tell me, is he a auditor's expert? Let's assume I'll remove the masters and CA both. Okay, so I am just saying I'll remove the masters and CA. He's a CPA, let's say, not of India but outside India. He's a CPA. Can I say him he's an auditor's expert? Yes, no, can't say. Come on, quickly. Shri Ram, Mega, Chitra, what do you think? Can I call him auditor's expert? Yes, no. Somewhat Chitra, yes, let's say. Why Sanjay? Why can I call him auditor's expert? Uh, See, Mega, the reason is not the degree. I'll explain you. Here, it's not about the degree. Trust me. When I say CPA or let's say any other degree, it is not related to the degree because of which he is not an auditor's expert. He is not an auditor's expert. I can, if he is doing this kind of work, no, I will say that he is an engagement quality control reviewer, not auditor's expert. He is reviewing my audit documentation. He is reviewing the key judgments. How he can be auditor's expert? Why he is not the EQCR? If I say he's an EQCR, SQC1, SA220 will be applicable. Yes or no? If I say auditor's expert, SA620 will be applicable. So should I say auditor's expert or EQCR? Is a EQCR. Okay. Now the question comes is why not auditor's expert? Why I'm differentiating here with respect to this person and other people? The answer is the area of the guidance. Area of the guidance reason because the standard says that auditor's responsibility to is issue the opinion. And when I use the term auditor has the knowledge of accounting and auditing. If I need someone else, okay, if I need someone else, it should be other than accounting and auditing. Simple example. I'll modify this example. Okay, a CA, again, a CA, he's an external, not from my firm, outside the firm, external, is reviewing audit documentation so that engagement partner can sign the report. Now, some might say that okay, this CA is an external. I'm taking his guidance. He's an auditor's expert. Okay, he's an auditor's expert because he's helping us, the engagement partner, reviewing the documentation. He's providing guidance to the engagement partner, and based on that, engagement partner is signing. Will he be auditor's expert or will he be team member? Will I call him auditor expert or will I call him team member? Same here. Will I call him EQCR or team member or auditor's expert? The reason and the only and foremost reason I will say is the area of the guidance. These are not the experts. No. The reason because they are reviewing audit documentation. So the area of guidance is audit. So when the area of guidance is not audit or accounting, at that point in time, I can say he's an auditor's expert. So for an auditor's expert, the first condition is expertise in area other than accounting and auditing. If that is the case, yes, then I proceed and I will check he's an auditor expert or not. Otherwise, no. Straightforward, no. They are the team members EQCR, not the auditor's expert. Okay. That is the first thing we understood. Who is an auditor's expert? Number two, work. What is work? What is work? What is work? I will take you to one of the audit plans that we have. We will discuss something over here. Okay. Now in our audit plan, we had a use of specialist. Our team will utilize IT auditors. Here we were talking about internal IT auditors to assess general ITGC controls. Now instead of internal, let's say I say external IT auditors. In this case, this specialist is he auditors expert. If I call him external IT auditors, here we had valuation specialist reviewing goodwill impairment model assumptions. Auditors expert or not? Same IT specialist, external. He's an external. Both are external. Auditors expert or not? Yes, absolutely correct, Megha. Very good. Yes, very good, Chitra. Both are auditors expert. Reason because the work that they are doing, IT general controls, goodwill impairment, model and assumptions, they are giving us sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. It's not accounting and auditing. It is valuation and IT. It's beyond accounting and auditing. That's why I can say them, and that's why I said external. Otherwise, they would have been being a team member. Okay. The moment I say external, they are auditors expert. The moment basically I say internal, they will become your team members. So that's why I mentioned external. Okay. So that is the difference. When I talk about auditors expert, it is the work I will be using. When I say work, is a specialist or expertise that I'm talking about. Let's say in IT, valuation, basically they will use expertise and will provide me or provide me and instead of auditor sufficient and appropriate audit evidence. So if they are providing their expertise for the and sufficient appropriate audit evidence, that is the work. So when I'm using the work of an auditor's expert, there is something we need to understand how we can use and what we need to do. Now, the first and the foremost question that I will ask you guys, let's say we will directly jump to the conclusion. For time being, we'll jump. Let's say I'm allowed to use the work. I'm allowed to, rely upon the work performed by auditors experts, subject to all the conditions and whatever it is. Can I mention his name in the audit report? Can I mention that I have used the work of auditors expert in my audit report? Can I mention his name there in the audit report that I have used his work? Because it is other than accounting and auditing. Yes, no, can't say. Come on, guys, quickly. Can I refer his work or not? Confidentiality will be considered. What confidentiality? I'm using the expert, let's say valuation. He gave me a report. Now, in my audit report, I said like valuation part is done by him. I relied upon his work, and my opinion is unmodified. Can I do that? We can rely. Okay, we can mention the name. Can we mention the name? Yes or no? Okay, we can mention the name. Okay, fine. Now, so you are saying we can mention the name, we can rely. Okay. Number one, we should not mention. First of all, you are not required, or you should not mention the name of auditor's expert or the thing that you are relying upon his work. The first and foremost thing is, whenever you are using the work of auditor's expert, internal audit, okay, apart from another auditor, whenever you are using a work of auditor's expert or internal audit, your responsibility doesn't go away. You are responsible for your own auditor's opinion, your own opinion. Auditor's expert is not issuing an opinion on financial statement. You are issuing. He is doing a work. Your responsibility is to check whether the work that is performed by him is appropriate for my purpose or not. And if you check that and then you issue in your opinion, you already did something, some procedures. You already checked, okay, his work is adequate for me or not. His work that he has performed is sufficient and appropriate audit evidence or not. You already checked that. Then why you want to refer his name again? So by referring the name, you will reduce your responsibility. That is not permissible. So when you are using the work of an auditor's expert, remember that you should not mention his name in the audit report except one particular condition is there. Okay. So this particular part I'm talking about, reference to the auditor's expert in the audit report. Usually, no, you cannot. But except there is qualification. For example, you are qualifying your report based on auditor's expert report. He gave you a valuation report. Let's say, for example, in our plan, okay, we hired a valuation specialist for the goodwill impairment. And he said there is a goodwill impairment. There should be an impairment on the goodwill at a very big level. Management is denying we will not do impairment. You will qualify. But in that qualification, you can now mention that you hired a valuation specialist who was an independent person. He valued that, and his judgment is also that there should be an impairment. So when I talk about qualification, at that point in time, I can refer his name, but I cannot refer his name in an unmodified opinion. Reason because it will reduce my responsibility. It will reduce auditor's responsibility for the audit opinion. This should not happen. So for unmodified opinion, Do not mention unless required by law. Okay. So that is the first point I wanted to discuss, because now we are clear that it is not reducing our responsibility. We can only mention his name in the report when there is a qualification or required by law. If there is an unmodified opinion, we are still fully responsible. We are not required to mention his name. Pretty much clear. Yes or no? Okay, great. Now, let's understand the objectives over here. See, what is the objective of the auditor in this particular scenario? So, the objective of the auditor is to determine whether to use the work of auditor's expert, whether you want to use. Number two, if using, then to determine whether that work is adequate for your purpose. So, first you decide you want to use or not, then you decide whether it is adequate or not. Okay, but if you decide it's that you want to use, and if you say it is adequate, then auditor is responsible. So responsibility for the audit opinion is of auditors only. Responsibility is not reduced by auditor's use of work of an auditor's expert. Okay, so in that case it will not reduce your responsibility. But if you determine that the work is adequate, still is your responsibility. Okay, now before I use the work of an auditor's expert, what I will check? Let's say there is an auditor's expert, valuation specialist, who is doing valuation of goodwill. What I will check? What I will check? If I want to use if I want to use the work of an auditor's expert before hiring the expert, what I will check? Very good, Sanjay. Yes. What I will check? Independence, competency. Yes, Chitra, very good. See, when I talk about, checking the auditor's expert, it is the part of this one, the adequacy. Okay, whether the work is adequate or not. For that, I need to check the expert and his work, both. First, I need to determine whether I need an expert or not. Once I determine, then I need to check the expert and his work both. Okay. In order to check expert, I will check one thing that is known as CCO: competency, capability, objectivity of that auditor's expert. Competency, capability, and objectivity is something that I will check first before I use or before I decide upon his work. Okay. Now, competency. How will I check competency? How will I check competency? Anyone? When I say competency, what I meant by competency? Anyone? Competency? No? See, when I will check competency, there are few things I will check. Number one, it's not only about the degrees, it's about his personal experience. Okay. Then, have I worked with that expert before? What is my experience working with him? Qualifications, membership of professional bodies, license to practice, publish paper or books. Okay, if he belongs to a particular firm or CA firm or something like that, any specialist firm, what standard they use, what quality control policies and procedures they use. So all these things comes into the purview of competency. Now, second, when I talk about capability, capability means I am, let's say, IT specialist. IT specialist, very big IT specialist is there. He has a very good knowledge of IT related areas. Now, the second thing I need to check is capability. I hired a single person who has a very good competency in IT, okay, IT evaluation, and I hired him to evaluate the entire IT system of a bank. Does he have that capability to perform that task? See, he might be having competency, that he is of that qualification, he has that experience. The second thing is capability. Does he has the capability to perform the task? Then comes the objectivity. Any association with the client itself, or any association with the company which is being audited. So once I determine that he has the competency, qualification, capability, resources, and the team to perform the IT check of entire bank, objectivity, he's not associated with the client in any way, fine, I can proceed ahead. Yes or no? Now, that was the TCO part of to check whether I should proceed with the expert or not. His work is still pending. I will check his work is also. But before I will check expert, then I will check work. But before even checking the expert, in our example, we decided I need a valuation specialist. We decided we need an IT specialist. How? How I decided that I need an IT specialist? I need an valuation specialist. Just because it is written, it should not be that I need it. There should be some basis to decide, yes, I need an expert. What are those bases? How will you decide that you need an expert? How will you determine that you need an expert? Anyone? Okay, risk complexity in the area, materiality, auditor's opinion based on the assessed risk of that particular area. Let's say going concern, higher risk of assessment, higher materiality. Should I need an auditor's expert? So if you say based on risk assessment, going concern, very high risk. Material, full material area. It's a high risk area. It's a material area. The most material area, going concern. Do I need an auditor's expert for that? If the risk assessment and the materiality are the basis. So if I determine that going concern is an area where there is a very high risk, there is an area which is very material, should I go and hire auditor's expert? No, going concern decision is made by management. No, it's not. Going concern, there is a standard SA 570. It's something we evaluate the management's assumption. We will discuss in much detail on that. But it is a very good area, very critical area. If, let's say, assume there is a very threat, there are conditions existing on the date of balance sheet, which creates a significant doubt on entity's ability to continue as a going concern. I'm saying significant doubt on entity's ability to continue as a going concern. Very material. Should I hire a auditor's expert? Yes, no. Answer is yes. Okay. How many of you say yes? That's where we need to understand one more thing. Very good, Mega. Very good, Chitra. If you say yes, then you need to understand one important thing again, that it should not be related to accounting and auditing. If it is related to accounting and auditing, then you are the auditor. You are already an expert. You don't need anyone else. But the moment it comes to other than accounting and auditing, it is the area where you might think of auditor's expert. Simple, in our scenario, in our plan, we had a critical risk, which is revenue recognition. I'll just remove as of now all these comments. Okay. There was a critical risk called revenue recognition. Now I said it's a critical risk, high risk of material misstatement. Okay. High risk of material misstatement, material also, everything is there. I should have appointed auditors expert for revenue recognition by that logic. So if a area is a higher risk, higher materiality, I should appoint an auditor expert, but that is not correct. Till that time that area belongs to auditing and accounting, it's a team member, not an auditor's expert, unless and until it's beyond accounting. Okay. So, first of all, it should be other than accounting and auditing. Then you determine the nature of the matter. Once you say other than accounting and auditing, determine the nature, which area, what is the risk of material misstatement, significance of his work in context of audit. For example, valuation, how valuation is important, materiality kind of. Auditor's knowledge and experience with respect to that work that he has previously performed. And is expert subject to auditors' firm quality control policies and procedures. These are the things that I need to determine before I say, okay, I need an auditor's expert or not. First, the area itself. Okay. So you can say the nature, risk of material misstatement, significance is kind of a materiality that we are talking about. Auditor's knowledge I'm talking about that area, and his previous work performed by that work. Okay, like whatever expert that has performed previously, also his knowledge on that, how much he understands, what is the his understanding about that particular area, and quality control. So if you can answer these questions, you can determine that whether you need an expert or not. For example, valuation. Yes, valuation of goodwill, or let's say valuation of land. Now, risk of material misstatement, if I say it is high, then I might need to consider that. Significant, it's a land, it's a valuation, obviously. Material, auditor's knowledge, is he auditing first time? Has he appointed the same valuation guy last year? Do we need a valuation, revaluation of the land? Okay, so auditor's knowledge, kind of, you can say past experience plus last valuation. Can we continue the last valuation, or do we need a fresh valuation? And fifth one is quality control. Why quality control? Because at the end you are responsible. SA220, STC1, you are responsible. You have to maintain quality control. So can you apply your quality control onto him? If yes, then it's a very good, because at the end you are going to be responsible for that. If no, then you should worry about, because if the quality control which is applicable to you, if you cannot apply to someone else whose work you are using, it's a problem for you. So nature, risk, materiality, knowledge, quality are the certain areas which you are required to consider before deciding you need an expert or not. Sir, if you appoint an IT specialist who is a freelancer only for a particular assignment, will he be an auditor's expert for a team, or a team member as he part of the audit team for this engagement? Now the question comes is, if I say he's a team member, is he subject to all the policies, procedures, all the policies that you have as a firm, like independence, like objectivity, like your, all the fundamental principles? So can you say that all these things are applicable to him? He is complying all these things. And at that point in time, when I say he is a team member, that means he is engaged with you for that particular audit. He is responsible for the work he has performed, because at the end, audit team is responsible for the audit. When I say a freelancer usually, or the experts usually, provide a disclaimer: I am not responsible for this opinion. If you rely, you have to rely based on your experience and procedures. You need to decide whether this particular, my opinion, is sufficient for you or not. That I leave up to you. So the valuation guy will do a valuation based on his technique, the way he wants to do. Simply IT specialist. If I say he's working based on his methodology, fine, he's in separate, an expert. But if I say he's working as per the guidance, methodology, and everything which is provided by the engagement partner, he will be part of the team. So there are a lot many things to consider when I say a team member or a specialist. Clear? Any doubt? Okay, once I understand the CCO, once I understand all these things, nature, risk, materiality, knowledge, quality control, my pretty much two questions are already answered: which area and which expert. Now, the last question that I need to answer, and very critical one, is how much work, or whether his work is adequate or not. Now, once I decide, finalize the expert, once I say, okay, he is the expert, I need an expert in this area, and he's the expert based on the CCO. Now comes the work he has performed. For example, valuation guy. Tomorrow, the valuation guy submits you a valuation report. How can you determine that report is adequate for your purpose? How will you determine that? That report is appropriately adequate for your purpose. Anyone? Anyone? How will you determine that this particular report that he is providing is adequate for your purpose? Objectivity, competency, already done. That is something to decide that whether we should continue with him or not, whether we should appoint him or not. Now, after appointment, he has provided us the valuation report. How can I make sure that valuation report is sufficient for me? How can I make sure that valuation report is sufficient for me? By checking his finding report, whether his finding relevant and reasonable. Very good, Mega. Yes. So to make sure, see, when I talk about a report, let's understand. When I talk about valuation of land, okay, report on valuation of land, on valuation of land. Now, what this report will have is, first of all, identification of land. Okay, it will have the identification, like which area, let's say land situated in Mumbai. Then you have a latitude, longitude, okay, coordinates. Okay, you have that to determine which is the area, land. Then you have a measurement. Let's say how big that area is. For example, 10 acres, whatever it is. I'm just giving a hypothetical example. I have a measurement. Now comes the best part. Based on the land situation identification, based on the measurement, I need a per unit rate which is applicable on the land. Land will have a different rate if it is situated within the city and the land which is situated outside the city. So let's say he took a rate of, hypothetical, again example, hypothetical, let's say 10 crore per acre. Okay, 10 crore per acre. Now this, based on this rate, he said 10 crore per acre, 10 acre land, total value of land is 100 crores. Fine, this is the valuation report. Now, in order to rely upon the valuation report, there are few things that I will check. Number one, methodology. Methodology here, the formula for valuation is that rate into area. Now, this rate is which rate? Like market rate, stamp duty rate. Let's say, for example, he has taken stamp duty rate. Stamp duty rate. And this area, from where he has taken the area? Area as per municipal records. So this is the valuation formula that is used. I will call this whole formula as an method. This is the method that has been used. Fine. Method is, now first of all I'll go, is this method appropriate? I said okay, let's say this method is appropriate. Fine. Now coming to next scenarios. Identification of land. Land situated in Mumbai, longitude, latitude. Here in this particular part, this one, it's a records, based on records, 10 acre land area. This is something based on the facts. So these are facts or information, or you can say data source, which is used in this case. I will say whether this is correct, from where he has taken 10 acre, where it is written 10 acre. So I will cross check, or he will provide me, okay, see, this is here in the document in municipal records. Fine. Longitude, latitude, I can check from the maps and everything. Fine. So that is data source. I will verify the information from where it is taken. I will verify the source of the information. Then comes the rate per unit. Let's say this stamp duty rate was taken, like stamp duty rates sometimes are yearly updated, sometimes are not yearly updated. So this rate was of 2024, okay, financial year 24, which he actually converted to 2025 by a formula. Again, he used an assumption that, okay, 2024 rate plus, so let's say some inflation is equal to 2025 rate. Now this inflation was an assumption. So I will verify this assumption. And then whatever outcome is there, I will verify whether this is something reasonable or not. Basically, if I talk about, first of all, I will do method. So in order to understand whole calculation, I will say, okay, whether it is reasonable what he has done, overview, reasonable or not. Number two, is it relevant? Let's say, for example, I needed not the valuation of the land, rather I needed that, okay, whether the land exists or not. For example, I needed a report on the existence of the land rather than the valuation. Valuation can be done without visiting the land based on the records. So he provided me this report. My goal was existence, physical verification of land. So for physical verification, this report was given to me. So the question comes is this relevant for me? Whatever he has done is relevant. Sometimes, people do a lot of complex calculation which is not relevant for the purpose of your valuation. For example, instead of taking 2024 rate, some what might they do is, instead of taking 24 rate, they will take 2020 rate and they will add inflation for 5 years. When you already have a 2024 rate, why to take 2020 rate? Is it relevant? So reasonable relevanceness is something first you need to check for the report. So I will check reasonableness and the relevance of the report. Okay. If I go back, so I need to check the relevance and the reasonableness of that expert's finding and conclusion. Number two, assumptions and method. Remember the method, the formula which is used. Assumption is a basically your inflation rate that has been taken. Are they relevant and reasonable? Those assumptions are appropriate. For example, method is to take 2024 rate and apply 1 year inflation. Still fine. But if I take 2020 rate and apply 5 year inflation, method is not appropriate. So whether the assumptions and method are appropriate and reasonable. Then third, if he uses the data, uses a source data, then whether that source data is relevant, complete, and accurate. For example, in our case, he is using this data, land records, area, and everything. The question comes is data relevant? Is this data accurate? Is the data complete? If yes, then only I can take and I can rely upon this data. 10-acre land situated over there. Otherwise, I cannot. So I need to check the relevance, completeness, and accuracy of that data source before relying on that. Okay, so to determine whether his work is adequate for my purpose or not, I need to check relevance and reasonableness of finding. I need to check reasonableness and relevance of assumptions and method. Then I need to check about the relevance. Okay, reasonableness and the relevance for the completeness, accuracy of that source data. So relevance, completeness, accuracy of the source data. So first, relevance, reasonableness of the finding and conclusions, relevance and reasonableness of the assumptions and methods, and relevance, completeness, accuracy of the source data. Okay. If you check all these three things, then you can say whether his work is adequate for your purpose or not. You also need to check consistency with other audit evidence. That means when I talk about consistency with other audit evidence, that is, I have this report in my hand, this which says then valuation of 100 crores. Last year also he gave me the same report, but where the valuation was only 75 crores or let's say 60 crores. So last year value was, let's say, 50 crores. Now the question comes is, you have some other audit evidence in your hand. Now from within a 1 year, how it jumped from 50 to 100 crores? What happened? Is it consistent with the other audit evidence? So the consistency is something we need to evaluate with other audit evidence. Then you decide whether it is adequate or not. Okay, so relevance, reasonableness for your finding, conclusions, consistency with other audit evidence, relevance and reasonableness for your assumptions and methods, then relevance, completeness and accuracy with respect to the data source or source data. Then if you decide it is not adequate, if you decide fine, okay, it's not adequate based, like he has done wrong formula, he has done something which is not complete, okay, it is not adequate, then perform other audit procedures or ask an expert to modify. Either ask the expert to perform further work or you perform the work. If you say it is not adequate, if adequate, fine, proceed ahead. If not adequate, then ask him or you do yourself the work. Simple. And remember, reference part. If you usually not, you should not refer the auditor's expert in the auditor's report containing unmodified opinion unless required by law, or if you want a modification. If an auditor makes a reference to the work of auditor's expert in the auditor's report, because of the modification, in that case, mention that it does not reduce your responsibility. So you can mention or you can refer to auditor's expert. Auditor's expert can only be referred either modification or required by law. But when you decide that I want to mention his name, also mention that responsibility is of auditor. It will not reduce your responsibility as an auditor. Okay, so this is all the things that you need to do when you are using the work of an auditor's expert. Clear? Any doubt with respect to this area or this standard? Any doubt? Okay, so in study material, it is 4.5.3 on your page 3.32. Quickly, we'll go through here. Okay, again, as I said, it should be area other than accounting and auditing. Then objective is like whether to use the work of auditor expert, whether you need an expert. If you need an expert, then whether work is adequate for your purpose. So check auditor, check expert and his work. Again, when you want to determine whether you need auditor's expert, you need to understand the area, risk of material misstatement. Okay, so obtain understanding, risk of material misstatement. Then you need to think of like what is the basically area where you want to use the auditor's expert, nature and significance of that matter. Okay, risk of material misstatement, all these things you need to understand before you want to use a expert. Then nature, timing and or extent of audit procedures, auditor's knowledge and experience with previous, like working with him. Okay, then quality control procedures applicable to him. All these things are relevant to understand you need an auditor's expert or not. Then you need to evaluate competency, capability and objectivity if you identify you need an auditor's expert. And once you evaluate, then again you need to understand all these things with respect to competency, capability, objectivity. You need to evaluate the adequacy of his work, finding and conclusions, then assumptions and method. Then you need to talk about data source. You need to think of data source is complete or not, relevance accurate, relevance complete and accurate. Okay, and when not adequate, so either ask him to perform further work or you perform the audit procedures appropriate. And with respect to the reference, shall not refer unless required by the law. If required by the modification, then mention that auditors, it does not reduce your responsibility. Okay, this is your SA 620 in the study material. Any doubt? Any doubt with respect to any of the area? No? Okay. If no further doubts, then I would recommend everyone to go through the rest of the session, rest of the study material also, because in the next chapter, in the next session, we will discuss SA 540, something with respect to the 520, analytical procedures is there, very important. Okay, and then rest of the part which is there with respect to evaluation of the misstatement. Okay, so all these things we will discuss in the next session with respect to 540, with respect to your 520 analytical procedures and 450. Okay, these are the things we will discuss in the next session. Please, please, please read the chapter. There is no alternative of reading the chapter and there is no alternative of practicing. You need to practice on these topics. Okay. So if no further doubts, then I propose to keep the session till here and then we will continue this in the next session. Okay. Okay, guys, then thank you. Thank you very much. Session over, sir. Thank you.